Yeah, but please do take me up on that for chatting me up, writing me an email. I'll send it.
Ricardo's also here for another couple of hours.
You can do that if you're not there. That came out wrong.
Who's going to FOSDEM? Who's going to FOSDEM?
Yeah, that's also, I know. Yeah. And it's recorded, so I'll be in trouble.
All right, yes. So I figured you'd rather hear about experience than technical stuff, Guix, because you've covered Nix already, and Ricardo is always good at the technical stuff. So I'm going to slip a little bit into experience, and especially my experience with packaging, which comes close to your heart, I'm sure, right? I'm not here going to convince you to go one way or the other. I'm going to try to tell you to use everything. So let's see if I get my Emacs command right. Yeah, I've got it right. So who am I? I'm a software developer for HPC, right? I do more software more than HPC, but I've got one tool that is running on HPCs around the world every minute. I'm responsible for consuming a lot of electricity. Sambamba. I'm also lazy because I'm a programmer. Yeah, so that's ultimately the starting point. And I don't like software deployment like most programmers. They hate it. But yeah, and there's a term pretty much developed for people like me, DevOps. It's like, we had to label ourselves at some point. We do deployment and development. But I think the main thing is that as a programmer, you don't want to repeat yourself, right? And I have trouble with the screen and my screen, so so I take deployment as a programming challenge, and I've always done that, right? So, and I've started quite early. Oh, sorry, let me talk about programmers. I know quite a few programmers still today who think that deployment is not their business. You know anyone who thinks like that? In science particularly? Right, so there I come with solutions. They say, okay, we should just use one programming language. Heard that one? No? Am I talking to the right group? They say we should use static binaries so we don't have any issues with libraries. Heard that one? Yeah? Okay, they still do that. We should avoid all types of dependencies, right?
Are you sure that you're writing the file software before you
No, exactly.
one language is Fortran?
Well, could be one.
Bamba is in D, no?
It's written in D, yes. It's D and C. So I started quite early with Linux. I was a Windows programmer at some point. I hate to admit. Yggdrasil was the first one I deployed in 1997, I think it was, in 1998. And then I got into Rock Linux. So have anyone heard here about Rock Linux? So this is early 2000s. And this was a distribution which targeted hackers, was written by hackers, and it was only written totally in shell scripts. It was amazing. It taught me a lot. It also installed everything from source. Yeah, so I would say there's plenty of heroics there. Debian. Any Debian developer packages here? No? Never have package from Debian or similar?
No, like I've done it myself.
Right, so that's doable, right? But to get into the Debian project, there's a lot of hurdles. I don't know if you are aware of that.
I had a friend that maintained Grab.
Yeah. So they have a system to vet people, and the reason is that actually packaging for Debian is pretty tough. Yeah, the tooling is tough, the approach is tough. But it's an amazing project. I think it's how many packages does Debian have today? Do you know? Anyone?
20,000? 50,000?
80,000. And last count. Isn't that amazing?
Depends on how good the packages are.
Yeah, okay, let's skip that one. Yeah, so Debian is also somewhat reproducible. They're putting a lot of effort into that the last years. But I think there still is something hovering around 80% also of that. And other systems like CentOS and Red Hat, they really have the similar problems. And the real issue there is that they haven't really dealt with dependencies properly. Yeah, it wasn't designed like that from the start, and it's true for all these distributions pretty much. And that also dictates why they have regular releases. Why they have a testing stage and a release stage, which goes in Debian's case every half year, I think, pretty much. And of course, you have this great deployment system, but you end up with old packages. Yeah? And in science, that's not good enough. We always want to run more recent software. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we end up with solutions like Homebrew and Easy Build and whatnot. So there we have Brew, Conda, Easy Build, Spec, you name it. And ultimately, they are about giving power to the user, right? It's about non-root installs. Convenience, binary installs, if you can do that. But there's some issues too, and anyone who's doing this knows this. But there are bootstrapping issues, right? Yeah, I mean, if somebody says, "Hey, I've got this HPC cluster, I cannot build my Easy Build package," has it happened? Bootstrapping is a real issue, right? And also, when somebody builds something on his cluster or his machine, whatever is sitting on that machine decides what's going to happen, right? So if he has a problem, he says, even if he can build it, but he encounters a bug, he cannot exactly reproduce what he's done or she has done.
The first point, power to the user, that's certainly true, but there's also a very good reason for that. We don't want to install scientific software as root,
Yep.
because we don't trust that it will. We don't trust it may wipe the whole file system because they have the same file.
Right.
It's also a big part of it.
Right. So you want to run it as user. Absolutely, and you want to run it in user land. And singularity is one of the reasons why people are excited in. Some people are excited in HPC land because it avoids that problem, right? I mean, Docker. I'll get to that. Containers, right ahead, right? Spot on. So, non-root also drives containers, to a large degree. There's more reasons to use containers, but I think that's the main one way, at least why they started up like that. Of course, it doesn't solve the actual dependency problem. The containers are somewhat reproducible as long as you have a binary blob that you copy across, right? But inside the binary blob, what is exactly there? And you don't know. Even when the point in time you build a container decides what's in the container. So even if you have a build script like Docker has, and you bootstrap it from Debian, if somebody builds a container 6 months later, it will be a different one, right? Because somewhere they will say apt-get update. It still needs root or kernel support, at least to build them, like you said, also for Singularity. You move gigabytes, which is a real problem. Yeah, people say, okay, just a few gigabytes doesn't matter. But actually, in many deployment scenarios, it is a real problem. Yeah, and I'm sure you've encountered that. And Singularity doesn't solve it. So, I came up with some math, right? Complexity is going up, in my opinion, right? Programming languages are a factor. Yeah, so the number of programmers in the last 10 years has gone up by 10 times, in my opinion. Right? The number of targets, we got more platforms now. ARM, you name it. Yeah, even within the Intel platform. And we've got the KNLs now for HPC. Very interesting, but another platform. So let's say the 10 times in the last 10 years, right? Then we have dependencies going up. I think the dependency graph is actually getting a lot more complex over time. And just to give a few hints, I mean, you're aware of this, right? Go. Node. Python? Oh, Python. Anyway, that's dramatic. So I've come up with a formula. So I said, the complexity is the programming languages times the number of targets times the dependencies to the square. All right, I just put in the square to make it interesting. Yeah, but So it's 10,000 times more complexity that we have to deal with in software deployment, right? And if you think about Node.js alone, that's 10,000 times. Yeah. So what am I on about? Well, one thing I'm involved with is a web service deployment, and it's a massive one. It's a very complex one. You know, the graph that Ricardo showed would be just a fraction of it. And one of the cool things about Guix is that you actually can make these graphs, right? Because they have it's designed in such a way that we have control over the graph, and we can explain it. We can show it at any time. So it's a complex environment. It's got three versions of Python in it. Yeah, with packages. Some packages, I mean, Python 2.4 isn't there because some modules only, stop their development after 2.4, so there's no support for it later. And we just do all that. And then we deal with versioning, yeah, because it's a development environment, so we have a staging server, we have a testing server, we have a development server, we have a production server, and all these runs on different versions of the environment, and we use Guix to import it for every type of platform. And it turns out, that once we wrote this solution, which took me a lot of time, I mean, I probably spent half a year on it to get this properly done, but now it's just easy. When we upgrade a package, we deploy it, to one of these environments, and it works. And the developers are very happy with it too, because they can roll back, for example. So what does it really want from a packaging system? We want it to be, foremost, we want it to be dependable and predictable, in my opinion, right? I write an update to a package, I deploy it, and I want it to be predictable, that it does what it does, what it should do, right? And if it doesn't do what it should do, I should be able to roll back. It should be reproducible, especially as a software developer, when people are running some Bamba somewhere, on CentOS, ancient version. I want them to use the exact same stack that I'm using, to run this software, because we had this Intel Xeon threading hyper-threading bug. I don't know if you heard of it. It actually came quite late to light, so we discovered the bug also quite late. I wasted a lot of time on that, but fortunately they could use the exact same software stack as I was using. Yeah, so. And I don't even know what distribution they were using. Probably CentOS. So I think also as a developer and deployment person, I want things to be incremental. Yeah, if I have something that exists and I trust it, I have faith in it, it's been running for years maybe, and I add something to it, it has to be predictable. That thing that you add to it should be the only thing that changes the system. So if a bug pops up after that, I know what actually causes the bug, right? Because the rest is still the same. Anyway, I'm dead against heroics. I want to be able to sleep at night. So a lot of questions here about Nix. I've been involved with Nix also. I was there pretty much from the start because I know Elko of Dolstar very well. He's coming tomorrow to our workshop also. And it's an amazing achievement, because Elko wrote it as a PhD thesis. And he got so many things right. I mean, the things he wrote in his thesis, we are still using today. They're exactly the same. It's really incredible. Let's see. And I think the key thing is full software isolation, What we can do, and Ricardo also showed examples of that, is we can just take some part of the whole software deployment stack, isolate it, and it's completely independent of the rest again. Yeah, and that's incredible, because one thing you're always dealing with when you're dealing with dependencies is this interference of this overflow of dependencies into your environment, and that actually Nix addresses and Guix also addresses. I actually wrote a paper together with Eelco in 2008 about this, about Nix. It's called Fixing Dependency Hell in Linux, I think. And it was published in linux.com, on linux.com. Still there, you can read it. So why did I leave Nix as an experienced guy? I didn't like the DSL that much. Yeah, I've never somehow, you know, and I'm not a. I mean, I like functional programming. I do some of it when it suits me, but I don't want to be delivered to functional programming. Yeah, so functional programming languages, to me, always feel like, you know, they're very suitable for many things, but not always what I want. And with Guix, I have the same problem because they wrote their own. You know, Eelco started his own programming language from scratch. And initially, it was very much like XSLT. You know, it was like a transformation language, lazy. And over time, they've been adding features to it, so it became more and more Turing complete. So now it's more and more looked like an actual programming language, but it's a really odd one. Yeah, and I just can't get my head around it. And I've written many packages in Guix, and I've also done a lot of work there, but it's not for me. So when I saw the GNU Guix presentation by Ludovic on FOSDEM a few years back, I went, what a great idea! You know, it's Guix, but with a proper programming language on top. And I know it was Lisp, and I didn't care about that. But it does make so much sense to me to have a language that actually is a proper language. So when you look at Guix, you know, the kernel is the only thing, the running kernel, right? It's actually not the kernel that is on the disk. It's the running kernel that is the actual only dependency that we have, right? So, which ultimately means the only dependency is the kernel API. And the Linux kernel API has been remarkably stable over the last 15 odd years. There's been a few changes, and Guix actually suffered from one. I remember that we had to rebuild packages because the way Linux approached the urandom changed, /dev urandom. That's about it. Sharing profiles is really interesting. I'll get to that in a little bit, I think, if I have time. Transactions, rollbacks, and versioning. So you can have different versions of everything. So did people explain the concept of the store and the hash? Should I do that again? I can do it in a few sentences, I think, I hope. Yeah, so the idea is that, you know, everything you use to build a package, say you take Apache, you take a web server, you can calculate a hash over the source code, right? Yeah, so the exact version of the source code. And what we do in Guix and in Guix is we just install the software under that particular hash that you computed over the source code. That's a simple explanation. But it's a little better than that, you know, because the packages that you depend on, you know, so Apache depends, for example, on glibc, are also taken into the hash. Right? So you get a completely unique hash for Apache with all its dependencies. Yeah, so we invented blockchains. Well, Eelco did. Then the other thing, it's get better than that, because if you change during a compilation step, if you add parameters to the configure step, for example, you optimize, use -03 on the GCC compilation, that also goes into the hash, right? So that changes too. So you can have an Apache that is optimized, an Apache that has, is not optimized, an Apache that targets some different platform. They all end up in their own places in the store, under unique hashes. So it means you can install all this software without them ever interfering with each other. But if they do share resources, they do, right? If they use a glibc that is shared because it has the exact same configuration, they'll share it. That was quick, right? And I think, based on this, that Guix and Guix have the most rigorous approach towards software deployment. Yeah, and I think it's necessary to do it this way. So I'm going to skip this. Right. So after Guix split from Guix, not allowed to say forked. We still use the same daemon, right? So underneath, it's really a very similar architecture. But what's on top of it is what makes Guix a totally different animal, right? I mean, the whole software environment that is built on top of the daemon, or that talks to the daemon, is totally unique. And I think, some of the functionality that Ricardo showed, like pack and environment, Nix has some of that, but it is different. And what I see in the last couple of years is that Guix is moving so fast. There's so much talent in that pool of people who are contributing to Guix that it's moving really fast forward. Yeah, and I think you'll be amazed if you look 3 years from now. Yeah, so we have full container support, targeted optimization and flavors, versioning, relocatable packages. Oh, no root or daemon required. So this may, you should prick up your ears. I actually gave a presentation on the ASPC channel. Was it track at FOSDEM was it 2 years ago or last year? I forgot. Last year, yeah. So I just presented my tool and I had about 5 minutes to do that. So, and this works actually for simpler software deployments. Yeah, so you shouldn't be thinking about Ruby on Rails or a window manager. But if you think about, for example, Sambamba, my tool, which I actually use this for, but you could also think about a decompiler, which I also use it for. When you compile it with Guix, right, it ends up in the store with all these unique paths, yeah, which is /gnu/stores and then the hash, which describes the package. Now these same paths are hard-coded inside the binaries, are hard-coded inside the shared libraries. They're hard-coded inside the scripts, which mean you can use a different tool, so post factum, to just basically hard patch those paths out again, and plug it into somebody's home directory. And that's exactly what I've done. So what means that I can use on the supercomputers at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in the US, where pretty much nothing is allowed, and they take blood when you enter the door. I can actually run my tools. I can run my tools, and it's really cool, And much of the Guix store I've actually ported that way. Yeah, so. And I also use it for supporting my developers. People who use these systems, right? So if I send them a version that I've compiled with all debugging information and all paths to the original source files, they can much easier report back to me, using GDB or whatever. One of the exciting things that's coming up is we're working on these channels. So it's a little different from what Nix does, but they also have channels. But the idea is that the GNU Guix environment is kind of rigorous because it's a GNU environment. So we have to abide by certain rules. The rules some we invent ourselves, some are invented by others. But of course, people want to have more freedom, how to produce stuff. And even if you want to support, for example, 3 different versions of Python or 3 different versions of Ruby, and it won't go into the trunk of Guix itself, you can create a channel and say, okay, I've got Pjotr's Ruby version here, with its specific flavor, maybe its own modules, and you can just push it to someone with a channel.
Is this also meant to cover proprietary software?
No, but you can. I do that actually.
Guix is quite sensitive to, right?
Yeah, so the main Guix package repository won't allow that, obviously. But yeah, you're the master of your own channel. And even to deploy binary software is possible too.
So say you want a package Intel compiler with Guix.
It's possible. Yeah. It will be possible. And you can do binary distribution too, because Guix already designed to have distributed distribution of binaries, right? So you can just set up your own Guix publish server locally. Also, it could happen here, and you can pull packages from that. It's like a cache for build systems. So that already I covered. Good. So on the heroism score. Right, ROG Linux, building with shell scripts, a whole distribution. Maybe not. I think Debian also. I mean, Debian is going to continue, and I use Debian. It's on my laptop, right? But I've got Guix on top of that. It's high maintenance. These people are actually, in my opinion, are heroes, or masochists. Depending how you look at it. But I'm very grateful they're doing that stuff. Brewcon and easy build, I have to be careful here, but I think initially heroism is low because it's fairly easy to put a new package together, especially if it's not a very complicated one. It gets high when when things go wrong, and especially when you talk about dependency issues. Anyone disagreeing here? There are heroes here, I know it. Like this. It's hidden, right? So Guix, I would say, is medium heroism, because you have to deal with a DSL, which you have to have a high opinion of yourself. And I think Guix has a normal heroism level, as long as you know Lisp, which may be heroic, I don't know. But I think Lisp is one of those languages that is fairly neutral, I mean, people don't really hate it. Yeah. It's not a compliment, but you could, if you had chosen any other language, you would have positioned yourself, I think, much more in terms of like a VI Emacs debate. Lisp is like, okay, well, we have to deal with this. Interestingly, a number of Guix packages have come from Debian. Yeah, so there we are gaining some ground. Bootstrap I discussed already. So yeah, we have some challenges, especially when it comes to non-Libre or difficult software. Comes to mind CUDA. CUDA is a royal pain. I have to deal with it, unfortunately, on one of the HPCs. Yeah, it's getting, yeah, it's, I have no words for it. I think it's totally rotten, though we have to use it. IPFS is another one I've encountered. The interplanetary file system. It's written in Go. Go has bootstrapping issues, because Go itself uses binaries to bootstrap itself, and it has in the packages it has lots of circular dependencies. Another one is Elasticsearch, which is actually the JVM. And I had the discussion right now with Ricardo. The JVM people and the people who package around the JVM, they just assume you use jars. Yeah. So, but if you have the lofty goal of building everything from source, it gets very hard. So I'm not here to choose you to tell you what to do, but I think GNU Guix is here to stay. I've been watching this project and I've been participating, and it's getting fancier pretty fast. If you see what it can do in 1 year's time, I'm just amazed. And I'm talking about the features that are built on top of a normal packager, like containers, container management or whatever. To me, it's a solid investment. And the fun thing is that we can use Debian, Guix, Nix, Conda, and EasyBuild all next to each other. They don't bite each other, right? So we are not competing in that way. And together, well, thanks to Debian, we have close to 100,000 packages. 80, some overlap, obviously, but yeah. So EasyBuild has 1,400 something, right? Guix is at the moment at 6,000. Yeah, and then Guix has 6,000, and Nix is I think at 14,000. It's been there for a couple of years.
Or 25,000 if you count Haskell.
Right. Right. So 25,000. So it's even more than 100,000, right? So power to the user. And it's getting better, and I can be more lazy. That was it. And I'm using Emacs for my presentations lately. Not even converting to PDF. This is better.
Actually, it is easier to build for Windows than it is for Mac, because the toolchain, a free toolchain that produces binaries for Windows is readily available, but a free toolchain that produces binaries for Mac, not.
Well, the Guix is a GNU project, so we're not going to support OS X or Windows directly.
Yeah,
Right.
but this is the thing compared to Linux, of course.
Yeah, so
This is through virtualization. So,
no, they build native.
They build native binaries.
oh, for Mac, yeah, they
Yeah.
have
And also for Windows.
where they cut the graph. But the graph at this point is assumed to be there.
Yeah.
But actually,
These are the whatever they call the Mac build tools, build chain, whatever. I think when you looked at the port that Nix did to Mac OS, it was fairly trivial. They did it very quickly. Yeah, so I think if you wanted to do the same with Guix, it shouldn't be a problem. But so far, nobody has wanted to.
But culturally they would. That's the thing, right?
No, we as a project don't have to do it. Other people can do it.
Right.
There are ways to do this properly,
Yeah.
but it is much more difficult than cutting the
But
ground.
it's fair. It's fair. I just think it's like you can't avoid the fact that part of Guix is also the politics. Like you can't use it without at least accepting some part of the politics.
Now, the GNU project is about Libre software, right? Yeah. So and
Right. That's right. Which is why some people won't use Debian. Like we don't use Debian that much in HPC. At least, like the CentOS is more common than Debian.
yeah. No, and we have to be pragmatic. You have the tooling from Intel that can be at times superior than other tools. But in the end, my personal opinion is that Libre wins. Yeah, there will always be, it's like with CUDA. CUDA is ahead of the curve at the moment. Yeah, it's because they control the hardware. But OpenCL is not that far behind for many things. Not that far, a couple of years.
They'll never get a native interface to the drive. Like video will never give them access to what they need to do it well. Like you're stuck with CUDA because that's what NVIDIA provides.
Well, yeah, but people reverse engineer. It's happening. They do. Yeah, it just takes time. I have a lot of faith in free software, and personally, I rather bet on free software than on being delivered to vendors in general. Yeah. So, and I'm preaching to the convert here, I know. Yeah, but
Supercomputers are running Linux out of the top 500.
Oh.
How many are running?
100%.
Yeah, all of them are.
How many are running?
Maybe there's one machine running Windows.
No, not anymore. The last list has 100%.
right, and the old farts here, including myself.
If you said that 20 years ago.
Exactly. They would have said you're crazy, right?
In the end of it.
We won.
Well, it's not the end yet.
We are still
Just a technical question. I guess Guix, just like Linux, uses RPath or RunPath? RunPath. So LD library path takes precedence.
Yes,
Okay.
but that's what you want.
No.
if we discuss this throughout this week.
No. We want to keep talking about it.
I found that sometimes you want to override particular libraries, provided that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, but if you don't know what you're
If you
doing,
don't know what you're doing, then well,
Yes.
Then you promise that you can still do it.
we have users that
we have users too.
that have.
And we not only have users, we also have random scripts.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh goodness.
Like commercial software that sets LD library path and messes everything.
Which is of course not your target.
So you're not suffering there. But yeah.
It is sometimes what you need to do is at least LD preload when you want to swap out.
Yeah, but I think because I think, in my opinion, LD tools shouldn't be used unless you really know what are you doing. So that's.
So I think LD preload is a better tool than LD library path because it's just everything. Just get me off.
But you can still LD preload when you're doing modify.
Yes.
So then why do you need that?
Because it's a good default. So we include references to the actual libraries that are supposed to be loaded.
Yeah.
Now I consider LD library paths to be a hack. LD preload as well. So when users come to me with, oh, this thing doesn't work, I say, do you have a don't do